In today's video, I'm going to be focusing your attention on 7 practical English idioms commonly used by native speakers that if you can use, your English is amazing. Are you ready to take your English to the next level? Of course you are, which is why you got to be watching this video as carefully as you can. So let's focus on these idioms. The first idiomatic expression that I highly recommend that you should learn and also use in your conversations is I wouldn't put it past someone to do something. I wouldn't put it past someone to do something. Once again, I wouldn't put it past someone to do something. When you say, I wouldn't put it past someone to do something, it means I'm not surprised if someone did something because it's typical of them, to do something. Or I'm not surprised if someone did something ridiculous, something stupid, something bad or terrible because it is typical of them to do so. Or someone is likely to do something, and when they do it, I'm not surprised because I can easily predict that they can do such a thing because it is typical of them. Let me give you an example of this idiomatic expression. She's always lazy. I wouldn't put it past her to make up another excuse to skip work. Once again, she's always lazy. I wouldn't put it past her to make up another excuse to skip work, which means she's always lazy, and I'm not surprised if she makes up another excuse to skip work, not to come to work. I will not be surprised by the fact that she makes up another excuse in order to avoid coming to work. Why? Because she's lazy. It's typical of her to avoid going to work, to avoid doing difficult things, to skip coming to work, to skip her shifts, or to make up an excuse not to come to work. It is typical of her. So I wouldn't put it past her to make up an excuse to avoid coming to work. Now let me focus your attention on the second phrase, the second idiomatic expression that you should learn and also use to sound like native speakers, which is to put someone in their place. To put someone in their place. But what does it mean when you put someone in their place? To put someone in their place means you show someone that they're not as important as they think they are. Sometimes people selfishly think that they're more important than others, or they're the most important people in a group of people, or they're the most important person in a certain group. But when we put them in their place, we just try to show them that they're not as important as they think they are. So to put someone in their place means to show someone that they're not as important as they think they are. Let me give you an example. When he started bragging about how better he is, she immediately put him in his place by reminding him of his past mistakes. When he started bragging about how better he is, she immediately put him in his place by reminding him of his past mistakes. Once again, when he started bragging about how better he is, she put him in his place by reminding him of his past mistakes. Which means when he started bragging about how better he is, she immediately started showing him that he is not as important as he is by reminding him of his past mistakes. So that's the meaning of to put someone in their place. Have you ever tried to put someone in their place? Comment the answer down below if you have ever tried to do so. And tell me about the result. Were you able to successfully put them in their place? What happened in the end? Comment the answers down below in the comment section. Now we're getting to the third idiomatic expression that if you know your English is amazing, your English is like native speakers, you can speak English in the same way as they do, which is to have it in you to do something. To have it in you to do something. To have it in you to do something. When you have it in you to do something, you have the ability, the talent, the potentiality, the capability, and the courage to do something. So to have it in you means to have the talent, to have the skills, capability, and potentialities to do something, or the courage to do something. An example, I think you have it in you to turn into a successful businessman. I think you have it in you to turn into a successful businessman, which means I believe that you have the ability, the courage, and the skills to become a successful businessman. The fourth idiomatic expression commonly used by native speakers that you need to learn and also use is someone has been had. Someone has been had. Someone has been had. But what does that mean? What does it mean when we say someone has been had? Well, when someone has been had, they've been deceived or tricked, usually into paying a certain amount of money. So when someone is deceived or tricked into, let's say, paying money, we can say that they've been had. So when we say someone has been had, it means someone has been deceived or tricked. You paid $500 for a fake watch. You've been had. You paid $500 for a fake watch. You've been had. You paid $500 for a fake watch. You've been had, which means you paid $500 for a fake watch. You've been deceived. You've been tricked. Now we're getting to the fifth idiom of today's video that if you can use, you can speak English perfectly like native speakers, which is someone is not having any of that. Someone is not having any of that. Someone is not having any of that. But what does it mean when we say someone is not having any of that? Well, when we say someone is not having any of that, it means someone doesn't agree to listen to you. Someone doesn't like to listen to you. Someone, insists on disagreeing with you, or someone does not like to obey you. Someone does not like to listen to you. So when we say someone is not having any of that, it means someone is not listening to you. Someone doesn't agree to listen to you. An example. I always tell him not to spend a lot of money on cars, but he's not having any of that. I always tell him not to spend a lot of money on cars, but he's not having any of that. I always tell him not to spend a lot of money on cars, but he's not having any of that, which means I always tell him not to spend a lot of money on cars, but he never listens. He never agrees to listen to me. He never listens to me. And now we're getting to the sixth phrase of today's video, which is to work both ways. To work both ways. To work both ways. When something works both ways, it has both advantages and disadvantages. It is both good and bad. It has both pros and cons. It has both positives and negatives. So to work both ways means to have both advantages and disadvantages, to have both negatives and positives. An example of this phrase, move into a new country works both ways. Move into a new country works both ways, which means move into a new country has both advantages and disadvantages, positives and negatives. And now we're getting to the final idiom of today's video, the seventh idiom of today's video, that if you know, your English is amazing, which is you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. But what does it mean when we say you can't have it both ways? You can't have it both ways means you can't have the advantages of two different situations at the same time. You can only have one. You gotta only choose one item between two things, or you gotta only choose one of the two things that you want to make a choice about, or you want to choose from. So you can only choose one thing, one item, between two different things that you want to make a choice about. So you can't have it both ways means you can't have two things at the same time. It is impossible for you to have two things at the same time. You only have to choose one of them. You only have to go with one of them. An example of this phrase. So you want a lot of money and you don't want to go to work. You can't have it both ways. So you want money and you don't want to go to work. You can't have it both ways. So you want money and you don't want to go to work. You can't have it both ways, which means it is not possible for you to avoid going to work and also to want a lot of money. If you want a lot of money, you got to go to work. It is not possible for you not to go to work and also want to have a lot of money. You got to choose one between these two things. You should either go to work and make a lot of money, or avoid going to work and forget about the money that you want. Forget about all the money that you want. You got to choose only one. You can't have it both ways. And that's about all, guys. Thank you for watching today's video. Let's review these idioms once again together before we finalize today's video. I wouldn't put it past someone to do something. I wouldn't put it past someone to do something. I wouldn't put it past someone to do something. Put someone in their place. Put someone in their place. Put someone in their place. Have it in you to do something. Have it in you to do something. Have it in you to do something. Someone has been had. Someone has been had. Someone has been had. Someone is not having any of that. Someone is not having any of that. Someone is not having any of that. Work both ways. Work both ways. Work both ways. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. Thank you for watching today's video. Make sure you like this video in support of this channel and all the effort I put into making these videos for you, and thank you so much for doing so, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I'll be back soon.